Welcome to Gospel Truth with Andrew Wommack, a teaching ministry that focuses on God's unconditional love and grace. And now, here's Andrew.
Welcome to our Friday's broadcast of the Gospel Truth. Today is the end of my 4th week teaching about God's will. For 3.5 weeks, I taught about how to find God's will, and then I've been talking about how to follow God's will. There's 5 teachings in this teaching on how to follow God's will, and this is the first teaching. Today is going to be my last day to talk about following the desires of your heart. And this is really a powerful truth. I've tried to emphasize this, that because it's so simple, that a lot of people think it's got to be more complicated than this. But this really is how simple it is. Psalms chapter 37, verse 4 says, "Delight yourself in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart." Now that needs some explanation, and that's what I've been doing. I'm not going to go back through all of this, but it's saying you have to delight yourself in the Lord. You can't just follow the desires of your heart if you aren't truly sold out to God and committed to God with your whole heart. But when you do make yourself a living sacrifice and you seek God first, and you are honestly, sincerely saying, "God, I put you first. I want your will above everything else." And if you mean that with all of your heart, then a supernatural thing happens. That when you delight yourself in the Lord, He changes your heart. His desires get put into your heart, and you lose these selfish desires. And you start desiring the things of God. And if, and again, this is a huge if, you have delighted yourself in the Lord, then, and only then, can you follow the desires of your heart, because those desires will be God-given, God-breathed. And really, when you stop and think about it, this sounds so simple. The only thing that's complicated, or the only thing that's hard, is it takes a while for you to cross that barrier to where you are more God-centered than you are self-centered. It takes a while for you to get off the throne of your life and to give God that place. But when you do it, and you know, I could spend an hour on this. I'm just going to say this. You need to pray about this and maybe let God expand it and increase the significance of this. I hadn't got time to do it, or I'm not going to take the time to do it. But when you become a living sacrifice, when you cross that barrier to where God is in control and not you is in control, that doesn't happen accidentally. It doesn't happen without notice. What I'm saying is, you can't do that without knowing that you've done it. It's a traumatic experience. It is not normal for you to yield the control of your life to a God that you can't see, taste, hear, smell, or feel. It takes faith, and it is just outside of the norm. And I can promise you that if you are living a life that is wholly committed to God, you know it. Now, that doesn't mean that you're doing it perfectly. None of us do it perfectly. But I can go back again to my personal testimony, and when God touched my life and when I made this commitment, March the 23rd, 1968, I gave everything there was to God. Now, that didn't mean that I did it perfectly, but I did it as much as I possibly could. If you would have come to me and says, "Did you hold anything out?" Nothing. I turned myself inside out. And it was a traumatic experience. It was a dramatic experience. And I guarantee you, I knew something had happened, and I knew God was now on the throne of my life, and I knew that God was in control. And I just can't imagine a person doing this without absolutely having some kind of a miraculous, life-changing encounter. So I say all of that to say that if you can't point to something and say, "You know what, I have truly made a commitment to God with my whole heart." Again, that doesn't rule out the fact that you're going to fail. We all have, we live in a sinful body, in a sinful world, and there are going to be mistakes. I'm not saying that you are perfect and that you never make another mistake, but I am saying that you know when you have given God the control of your life. And once you do that, then God starts changing your desires. And you can literally go with the desires of your heart. And I know to some people that's scary because you aren't absolutely convinced that God is in control, and you're aware that many of your desires are just totally, totally out in left field. They violate the Word directly. And, you know, by me teaching on this, I'm running the potential or the risk of someone who just says, oh, yeah, I believe I'm delighting myself in God. And so Andrew said, Psalms chapter 37:4 says, He'll give you the desires of your heart, so I'm just going to do this because it's what I've always wanted to do. If you aren't truly committed to God, that's a recipe for disaster. But when you do commit your life to God, it makes a huge difference, and God starts changing the desires of your heart. I've given you examples about how God led me out of school because of this. I lost the desire to go through a secular education, and all of a sudden I just knew. I mean, I wanted to be so committed to God. I didn't know exactly how He was going to use me, but I knew I wasn't just going to be teaching school or doing something normal, natural like I expected, and I knew that going through that university training was not a part of my life. And I mean, God helped me to make one of the most important decisions of my life within 2 or 3 weeks after I had this miraculous encounter where I made Jesus the absolute Lord of my life, and I made myself a living sacrifice. And instantly my life began to change. And since then, I've made thousands and thousands and thousands of decisions primarily based on God, I put you first. What is your will? I seek Him. And God just gives me His desires. He puts His desire in my heart. I could list hundreds of them probably, but you know, I was on radio because I have always, even before I had this experience and I committed myself to the Lord, I'd be driving down the road and I'd hear a radio preacher, and I would think, you know, if I ever go on radio, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And I selected the song from the 2nd chapter of Acts, that musical group, the one about Hear the Bells Ringing. We were talking about that earlier with my camera crew. And I knew back when I was a teenager that someday I wanted to have a radio program and tell people about God, and I knew what song I'd use, and I knew all of these things. And it was just a desire that I had in my heart. And then lo and behold, here I've been on radio since 1976 on a daily basis and been ministering constantly. And I had this desire for radio, and I felt like that someday I would be on television. And I had been a guest on other people's television programs. I've got as many as 1,000 requests in one day to a teaching that I did as a guest on other people's shows. And there was an anointing there, and I had a lot of people tell me, and I knew that someday I'd be on television, but you know what? I just had no desire for it because I knew it was going to be expensive. I knew that it could make or break the ministry. I knew there's just a lot involved in it, and you know, just a lot of things. And so because of it, I could see it coming, but I had no desire for it. And then in the summer of 1998, God spoke some things to me, and I could see myself on television, and it's like my desires just switched like 180 degrees. One week, if you would have asked me, are you going to go on television, I would have said sometime, probably, but not now. It's just not time. And then, I mean, in 1 week's time, my heart changed to where all of a sudden, instead of desiring not to be on television, I had a burning passion on the inside of me to go on television. I sat down and I basically drew out this set. It wasn't the exact same thing, but it was the same style. It had exposed wood beams and flagstone and all of these things that you see. I had this exact idea. I knew that I wasn't going to be standing in a 3-piece suit and walking and preaching like other people, but I was just going to be sitting down and talking to you just like we were in your living room. And I was talking, and I knew all of these things, and I mean within, just like that, my desires changed. And following those desires, I started on television January the 3rd, 2000, and did you know that that's when our whole ministry really started? Matter of fact, just a few months prior to that, the Lord spoke to me in a dream and told me, He says, you are just now beginning to fulfill my will for your life. Everything prior to that, 31 years of ministry was preparation for what's happened in the last 10 years being on television. And truthfully, our ministry has increased 20 or 30-fold since we've started on television. And you know how all that came to pass? I never heard an audible voice. I didn't get a prophecy. God changed the desires of my heart. And something that I never desired, all of a sudden I desired. And it was such a dramatic about-face, such a radical and quick turn that I prayed about it for about a week and made sure. But the more I sought the Lord, the stronger the desire to be on television got. And I pursued it, and it all came to pass. The same thing happened with our Bible college. You know, I never desired a Bible college. Matter of fact, I even told people I did not ever want my name associated with the Bible college because I had seen a lot of ministers who came through Bible college, and they got a big head, thinking that they were superior to other people because they knew something. And you know, the Scripture says in 1 Corinthians chapter 8, I believe it is, verse 1, that knowledge puffs up, but love edifies. And I saw a lot of people get puffed up with a degree and thinking that they were superior and go out, and they caused more problems. They didn't have the right heart. Their attitude stunk. And yet they had a degree, and they went out and they were the professionals, and I just didn't want to be associated with something like that. And so for years, people would say, you need to start a Bible college. And I said, no way. I'm never going to have my name associated with anything called a Bible college. But then in the summer of 1993, I was over in England, and I have always been committed to making disciples. I tried to do that through my radio, through my tapes, books, things like this, and I was trying to establish people in the Word, but I didn't think Bible college was the way to do it. And I was sitting in a meeting in England, and a man said, unless you are reproducing yourself in the lives of other people, you are ultimately a failure. And I knew that principle. I hadn't heard it in those words, but I knew that principle, and I was doing everything I could to try and get it across. And I said, God, how do I do it? And I had the thought come to me about a Bible school. And immediately I started resisting these thoughts about, no, I don't think that's it, because I'd seen people come out of Bible school. But then the Lord spoke to me and showed me a unique way of doing it, where it's not just book knowledge. Certainly there's a lot of that and a lot of classroom instruction, but then He showed me how to impact people's lives on a personal level, how to have them, force them to go on missions trips in order to be able to graduate, and all of these practical things. And all of a sudden I saw it. I saw how we could have a different type of Bible college that didn't just impart knowledge, but it actually mentored people and made a difference. And did you know, I mean, in an hour's time, I turned from saying never a Bible college to all of a sudden, oh, I see it. And man, I wanted it. And I desired it. And you know, again, because there was room for me to misinterpret those feelings, I prayed about it for a week or two. And the more, see, here again is this principle that I've been talking about. Psalms 37:4, delight yourself in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart. When something becomes a desire of mine, there is always the possibility that I am not really putting God first and that I'm doing something selfish. And so how do you discern whether it's really the spirit man that is desiring this or if it's the carnal self? I go back and I just delight myself in the Lord. I make sure that I'm focused on the Lord. I will fast. I'll pray. I'll cut off every other thing. I'll get away from people. I'll stop my normal routine. And I will focus my mind and my heart and my seeking on the Lord stronger than I normally do. And the more I get into the presence of the Lord, the more I delight myself in the Lord. If that desire increases, then you know what? It's because that desire is coming from God. But if the more I get into the presence of God and the more I focus on God, if that desire diminishes or sometimes just evaporates, it's because I was carnal and I wasn't putting God first. So this is how I check these desires. When the Lord gave me this desire, all of a sudden I saw a Bible college that could be different and that could mentor instead of just give information. I prayed about it for 2 or 3 weeks, and the more I prayed about it, the stronger it got, and the more I got into delighting myself in the Lord, the stronger the desires got. You know what? I went ahead and started our Charis Bible College based on nothing but these desires of my heart. It was so radical. For 20, 30 years, I'd been going this direction saying, no, never a Bible school. And all of a sudden, boom, I was in the other direction, and I was just desiring it so much. And the more I sought God, the stronger the desire got. I knew that that wasn't normal. It wasn't natural. For 20 years, nothing had ever moved me. And all of a sudden, man, my heart just changed like that. And you know what? I recognize that that's God speaking to me. And I began to follow the desires of my heart. And we started Charis Bible College in 1994. And we've now graduated thousands of students. We have about, by the time you'll be seeing this, we probably have 400 plus in the school here in Colorado Springs, about 1,000 people taking the Bible school in all of our 15 different locations worldwide, 1,000 people doing it by online Bible study or correspondence. And so we've got a couple of thousand that we're impacting right now. Within a year or two, we will have 3,000, 4,000. And these people are going out and changing the world. And in hindsight, you know, Jamie and I, we sat down and looked at this Destiny Stories volume that we've played some of these here on our television. Jamie and I sat down in our home and watched this and saw the impact that the Bible school had had on these people, and then now they are impacting thousands of people. They have literally met with the president and first lady of some of these nations. In some nations, over 500,000 people are going through our discipleship evangelism materials on a monthly basis. And when we saw the impact of all of this, Jamie looked at me and she says, you know, if the Lord tarries, she says, I think that the Charis Bible College is going to be the biggest way that we had of impacting the world. And I agree 100%. And you know how all of that came to pass? I didn't hear an audible voice. I didn't get a prophecy. There wasn't any dramatic thing. It was me seeking God, and God put the desire for a Bible college in there, and I followed it, and I can truthfully say that there hasn't been supernatural audible voices, any of the things miraculous. I didn't see an angel. I didn't have something float down from heaven. I hadn't even had anybody prophesy to me about this. And yet, I believe that anybody who was close enough to our ministry to look at it and evaluate it would say that this Bible college is changing people's lives at a deeper level, to a greater degree than anything I've ever done. And you know how it all started? By me just delighting myself in the Lord, and He gave me the desires of my heart. I know that some of you this is nearly too good to be true, and you think, well, there's nothing to that. Well, the thing that is hard is just making yourself that living sacrifice, making sure that you are delighting yourself in God more than you are other things. And you can't do that without effort. It takes effort to put God first in your life. You have to turn off some other things and turn on God. But you know what? It's well worth the effort. And really, if you just put the effort into knowing God, having a relationship with Him, keeping your heart and your mind stayed on Him, and not let other things come in and choke the time that you should be spending with the Lord. You just stay in the Word. You stay in fellowship with God. And if you do that, then the rest of the Christian life, really, it just follows automatically. He gives you the desires of your heart. You know, I've mentioned this a couple of times, but now the Bible College has grown to such a degree that we're anticipating in the next few years we'll have 1,000 students right here in Colorado Springs, and our facility can't hold that many. So we're using the church next door, but 1,000 is the max with them, and I really believe that we're going to be up to 2,500 or more students at our home base. And so based on that, we had to make some decisions. And you know, this is something that is just fresh with me. But when I got turned on to the Lord in 1968, I mean immediately, within a month, I was driving through the country and looking at these estates and big old houses and large pieces of property and thinking, man, someday I'd like to have a place to where we could build something that is dedicated to the glory of God. We could have conventions and conferences and people coming in and people's lives being changed. And you know, I wished I had about 2-3 hours to explain this to you. It's hard for me to communicate this because most people don't think this way. But I, over the last 42 years, have driven by tens of thousands of places for sale, and I never saw a for sale sign that I didn't think, man, I wonder if that could be something that we could use to draw people in and to minister the gospel and to train people. And I've had this in my heart forever. 15 or 20 years ago, I lost 2 or 3 nights' sleep in 1 week when I just got so excited. I drew plans and pictures of what the auditorium would look like and all of these kind of things. And it has occupied me to such a degree that I have been bothered by it, really. And I've prayed and asked God to take it away. And it's a long story, but last year, as we were deciding that we've got to do something to accommodate this growth, and we were contemplating just spreading the ministry out into one building and the Bible college into another building and all of these different things, I was willing to let this desire that I've had in my heart go because it seemed impractical. And I was willing to let it go. And long story, but God, just in a sense, hemmed us in to where we would have had to have paid a minimum of $20 million for land here in Colorado Springs. And that's bare land, nothing on it. And then we would have had to have built, and that was just for a minimal amount of land that everything would have been crowded. And while we were contemplating that, God dumped in our lap a 157-acre parcel of land with nearly a $3 million lodge on it and gave us all of that for $4 million. So it would have been $20 million for bare land versus $4 million for something with a $3 million lodge on it and the most beautiful views, and would accommodate every desire and everything that I've had for the last 42 years. It's like somebody asked Jamie, says, do you think that that's God? And she says, we would have had to have backslid on God to keep from doing this. And I'm saying all of this to say that, you know, one of the ways that I know that this is God that's directing, and you could look at the finances, and I mean, we paid 1/4 or 1/5 what it would have cost for something that was less potential. And there's a lot of things. You could look at it in just the physical, the natural realm. You could look at circumstance. You could look at a lot of things. But you know the number one thing to me? This has been a desire of my heart for 42 years, and I couldn't figure out why. It didn't make sense, especially 42 years ago when there were thousands and thousands of people staying away from my meetings. Amen. I mean, we struggled, and there was times that it looked like we weren't going to make it through the week. We weren't even eating, and yet I was out dreaming about having a conference center and a place where I could train up people and disciple them to go change the world. And now that it's come to pass, I can look back and see that, you know what, I've delighted myself in the Lord, and God has given me the desires of my heart. This is just a principle of God. It's how you follow God's will. Make God first. Be willing to do anything and literally get off the throne of your life and let God sit in that position. And God, I'll go anywhere. I'll do anything. And it takes a period of time for that to become rooted and established and to be an actual commitment of your heart. But once that's done, you'll find out God will start changing the desires of your heart. He'll put His desires in your heart. And that will be one of the ways that God leads you. I have people come to me all the time saying, I just don't have any guidance from God. And I'll sit down and start saying, all right, if you don't have to think about money, family, if you didn't have to worry about anything, what is it that you want to do? And nearly every time they have a desire. They just aren't trusting that that's God leading them. I tell you, this could really help you. I believe that this is a tremendous truth. We're out of time today. And today is going to be my last day to teach on this first teaching in the 5-part set on how to follow God's will. The first teaching is entitled, Following the Desires of Your Heart. If you'll listen, our announcer is going to give you that information, and call or write today.
Andrew's complete teaching titled, How to Follow God's Will, was recorded live at a recent Gospel Truth seminar. It's available on either CD or DVD for £16. This series is also available on DVD as seen on our daily TV program. You can receive it for £16 when you write or call. Or you can get today's teaching as part of the God's Will package, which includes 3 albums, How to Find God's Will, How to Follow God's Will, and How to Fulfill God's Will. As a bonus, the package includes the Destiny Stories DVD, highlighting 4 stories of people whose lives were transformed as they pursued God's will for their lives. The entire package has a catalog value of £48. But Andrew considers this teaching so important, he'd like to get it to as many people as possible. Therefore, he's offering it to you for a gift of just £40 or more. Remember to specify the CD or DVD package when you order.
Let me emphasize once again that today is our last day to offer you the first teaching in this 5-part set. This first CD is entitled Following the Desires of Your Heart, and it'll cover what I've talked about the last few days. The entire album is entitled How to Follow God's Will, and there's 5 teachings in that. We will continue to offer this album until we go through all 5 teachings, but we offer the album for a donation of any amount. And even though we don't put a specific price on it, some people will not send anything or could not send anything. I found that sometimes the people that need the teaching the most are the least able to afford it. So my partners have enabled me to offer each teaching free of charge, one at a time. Today's the last day to offer the first teaching entitled Following the Desires of Your Heart.
You can use your credit card to order resources by telephone. Our helpline number is 01922 473 300. When calling from outside the UK, you must dial your international calling code, then 44 1922 473 300. Helpline hours are from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. Or you can visit our website where you can order ministry materials 24 hours a day, 7 days a week at awme.net. To write us, use the address on your screen. We hope to hear from you today. We'd like to remind you that we're offering Andrew's latest book titled God Wants You Well for £8.50. Contact us today to get your copy. We'd like to point out Andrew's upcoming speaking schedule. Mark your calendars to come meet Andrew at one of these events and let the Word of God transform your life. He'll be in Colorado Springs for the Andrew Wommack Ministers Conference October 4th through the 8th, and in Buxton, Derbyshire in England for the Andrew Wommack Ministries of Europe Ministers Conference October 18th through the 20th. For more details on Andrew's next meeting in your area, call our helpline or visit our website at awme.net.
There's much more than just classroom activity at Charis Bible College. Students participate in hands-on ministry, like working on the ministry helpline.
I'm a first-year student at CBC, and I work in the phone center full-time.
I'm a second-year student at CBC, and I work full-time in the phone ministry.
90% of the volunteers in the phone center are Charis Bible College students.
Thank you for calling Andrew Wommack Ministries.
80% of the employees are CBC graduates.
I'm a graduate of CBC last year in 2009, and I've been working in the phone center for 2 years.
The ministry and the college are working hand in hand to deliver the gospel truth every day.
We're changing lives and we're changing the world one life at a time.